The air carried the bite of early autumn, that subtle sting in the breeze whispering that winter wasn't far off. Leaves danced across the cracked pavement outside a small building at the edge of town. Its sign, though faded, still read, "Safe Haven Animal Shelter." Luke stood at the door, motionless. He wore an old military jacket, sleeves frayed, pockets deep enough to bury both hands. His walk bore the stiffness of a man who had lived through battles both seen and unseen. The lines etched into his face were not just from age, but the weight of memories that lingered like ghosts. His steel-gray eyes swept the room as he stepped inside. Not seeking, just observing. He hadn't come to adopt. The VA counselor had mentioned it weeks ago. "Just visit," she'd said softly. "Sometimes the right connection finds you." Luke hadn't laughed. He rarely did these days. The shelter smelled faintly of bleach and wet fur. Barks echoed from narrow corridors, rising and falling like waves. A young staff member approached with a polite smile. "Can I help you, sir?" "Just looking," Luke replied quietly. She nodded and gestured toward the kennels. "Take your time." He moved slowly, hands still in his jacket pockets. Dogs pressed against the gates, tails wagging, eyes pleading. A beagle barked sharply. A golden retriever pawed at the bars. Luke barely flinched. His eyes were distant, as if walking through someone else's dream. Then he reached the final kennel. In the far corner, nearly hidden in shadow, lay a large German shepherd. His coat was dull, patches of fur missing. One hind leg trembled, a relic from an old wound. His ears drooped low, gaze fixed to the cold concrete. Luke stepped closer. In that instant, the shepherd stirred. Slowly, painfully, he raised his head. Tired eyes, but alert, locked onto Luke's. A soft bark escaped. Not desperate, not loud. Just familiar. Luke's breath caught. He lowered himself, crouching to the dog's level. The world faded. Other barks became background noise. The shepherd rose, stiff but steady, and walked toward the gate. A faded nameplate read, "Titan Male Approximate. 9 years former K9 unit not recommended for adoption due to age and injury." Neither looked away. They had both served. They had both been broken. They had both been left behind. And now, in this quiet moment, neither of them was alone. Minutes later, the same staff member returned. Her voice softened when she saw them. "You're looking at Titan. He usually doesn't get up for anyone." "He was K9, Luke asked. She nodded. "Retired after an injury. Torn tendon during search and rescue. He recovered, but not fully. No one's wanted him." Luke looked at Titan's leg. No one wanted a broken dog. Not unless they're broken too. She hesitated. "Would you like to walk him?" Luke nodded. Titan limped as he stepped out, but moved with silent dignity. When Luke took the leash, Titan looked up at him, not with fear but recognition. They walked together in silence, Luke occasionally giving subtle hand signals. Titan responded every time. "You remember," Luke whispered. Titan's tail wagged once. Back inside, Luke spoke to the staff. "I want to take him home." She blinked. "He has challenges." "I'm not looking for easy," Luke replied. "Neither is he." An hour later, Titan climbed into the passenger seat of Luke's old truck without hesitation. "You ready, partner?" Luke asked. Titan let out a quiet chuff and laid his head down. They didn't look back. Luke's cabin sat near the woods, quiet and modest. Titan explored slowly, limping from room to room. Luke gave him space. Mornings became walks along forest paths. Titan's limp remained, but his pace was steady. Evenings found them by the fire, Luke cooking warm meals, Titan curled up near the hearth. Over time, Luke began to talk about his wife, the war, the silence he'd carried. Titan listened, always nearby. One afternoon, Luke gave an old K9 command, "Down." Titan obeyed instantly. Luke smiled. Training resumed. Simple commands, small tasks. Luke built a modest agility course in the yard. They weren't soldiers anymore, but they were partners. Nights were hardest. One evening, Luke awoke from a nightmare, drenched in sweat. He knocked over a lamp. Titan approached quietly, pressing his head into Luke's leg. Luke sank to the floor, clutching Titan like a lifeline. And for the first time in years, he wept. Not for the war, not for the dead, but for the years he believed no one could understand. Titan stayed. Steady. Solid. He wasn't alone anymore. Spring came. The woods were damp, shrouded in mist. On a morning walk, Luke took a turn off the path. A hidden den, widened by time, gave way beneath him. He crashed down into darkness. Pain exploded in his leg. "Damn it," he hissed. Titan appeared at the edge, barking sharply. "I am okay," Luke shouted. He checked his phone. No signal. Titan whined, pacing. Luke's voice hardened. "Go. Get help." Titan hesitated. "Go, soldier. That's an order." Titan turned and vanished into the woods. It took him nearly 30 minutes to reach the clearing near the cabin. Every step was agony. But he pressed on. He reached the porch and barked. No answer. He turned, limping toward the neighbor's house. Barking until the door opened. A woman stepped out. "Titan." He barked again, turned, ran a few paces, then looked back. She followed. Her husband joined. Titan led them to the pit. Luke's faint voice called out. EMTs arrived within the hour. As they lifted Luke into the ambulance, he reached out. "You did it," he whispered, hand resting on Titan's head. "You came back." The story spread. The injured German shepherd who crossed the woods to save his handler. Neighbors called him a hero. The EMTs called him a legend. Back home, Titan curled on Luke's side of the bed, aching but fulfilled. Because love doesn't count steps. It remembers direction. And Titan had found his. The story of Luke and Titan became local lore. Newspapers ran the headline, "Veterans saved by loyal dog." When asked why Titan came back, Luke replied simply, "Because that's what brothers do." Children sent drawings. Veterans saluted as Titan received a custom vest and medal, companion of honor. Late one night, a sound broke the quiet. Glass shattered. Titan, now older, rose with effort. He barked sharply. Luke jolted awake. "What is it, boy?" Outside, motion lights flared. A figure ran. Luke stepped onto the porch as Titan barked again. Neighbors emerged. Police arrived. "You're lucky," one officer said. "He's hit other houses." He didn't see him, Luke said, stroking Titan. He felt him. Titan was a hero again. A sign went up, "Protected by Titan, hero and hound." But Titan stayed humble, quiet, watchful. Each morning, Luke clipped on his leash. They walked the same path. Titan's muzzle grayed, steps slower, but he always wagged his tail. Then, one winter morning, Luke rose early. Titan hadn't moved, curled at his usual spot, head resting on Luke's boot. Still, Luke knelt, hand on Titan's back. No words, just the ache of goodbye. Later, he dug a grave beneath the oak, their favorite place. Titan was wrapped in his blanket, collar placed gently atop. "You didn't just save me," Luke whispered. "You gave me a reason to live." Snow fell as he turned toward home. Weeks passed, the cabin quiet again, until one spring morning, a knock came. A staff member from the shelter stood with a puppy, big paws, uncertain eyes. "We thought maybe—" Luke looked down. The pup wagged its tail. He reached out. The pup licked his hand. "You've got big paws to fill, kid." Luke stepped onto the porch, sun rising behind him. Under the oak, the leaves stirred. Love never truly leaves. It just finds a new way to return.